Canadian Pacific shareholders will vote tomorrow to pick a new slate of directors for the embattled rail company, and major changes could be made atop the 130-year-old firm. Activist shareholder Bill Ackman has been speaking out. He and his firm Pershing Square Capital Management have said CP is underperforming. Ackman has proposed 7 new board members and a new CEO, former CN railhead Hunter Harrison. And if sweeping changes do come, current CP CEO Fred Green could soon be out of a job. While proxy fights like this one occur all the time, it's rare that they get this much public attention. And the spotlight cast on the process has some calling for changes. Brad Allen is Senior Vice President with Laurel Hill Advisory Group. So, Brad Allen, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
I think it's going to be maybe a little messy tomorrow, because when CP first came out with their proxy circular, I guess a couple of months ago, and indicated they were going to waive the proxy cutoff right out of the gate, to me that said at the time I didn't think this meeting was going to get all the way to tomorrow, but since it is now, I think it'll be a bit of a mess because of the fact that the dissident, Bill Ackman, only really needs to submit his proxies at the last minute, and as a result of that, somebody still has to tabulate all these votes and compare and contrast whether or not they voted on Ackman's card or whether they voted on CP's card, because it's the last vote that matters. So not only do they have to tabulate each side's votes, they have to cross-check to make sure whoever submitted, if someone voted on both cards, whoever submitted the vote latest is the one that overwrites any earlier votes that they submitted. So it's a bit of a mess. And normally you have 2 days to do that under Canadian typical operation. We have a 48-hour cutoff. In the U.S., they don't have a cutoff. And I don't know if that influenced CP or not. But without having that 2-day buffer for management to be able to see where they sit and see all the proxies and see whether or not they're winning or how bad they're losing, and allow people to start making press releases in advance, they're now going to have to do it all tomorrow. And I don't think it's all going to happen tomorrow.
So technically, we have a stalled voting process. In other words, you have to physically count these things.
Right.
So what actually happens to the meeting itself? Is it just extended all night?
Yeah, well, I've been in some meetings where it's gone on for 4 or 5 hours with media in the back, and the chairman comes out and says, we're going to adjourn for another hour or 2. In this one, I've heard it could be days before they actually get this resolved. We won't know till tomorrow, but I really don't think it's going to happen during the meeting. In the U.S., since they don't have proxy cutoffs and they're used to this, what they normally do, they have a different system though, and they would normally at the end of a meeting announce the preliminary results, which would be the indication of what the meeting is going to end up at being, and they'll finalize the meeting then. And then they'll have a inspector of elections do the final vote tally, but it's usually not a big difference between the two. We don't have that mechanism here in Canada, so they'll adjourn the meeting presumably, and when they reinstate the meeting, you don't know. And the other sort of interesting tactic that could potentially manifest is if they do adjourn the meeting to do this, the meeting's technically still open. So now management sees exactly where they stand. They could use that time during the adjournment to try and revocate try and get some institutional shareholders to revocate their vote, last-ditch attempt to try and influence some of the voting results. So.
Now, we know some of the things that Bill Ackman wants to do with the company. We know who he wants for the CEO and that he wants to see better operational efficiency, et cetera. But he really hasn't put out very much of a detailed plan. Is that helped him or hurt him, do you think?
I think it's helped him, and this is one of the issues that I have, is that when you look at the proxy advisory firms that have all recommended for Ackman's slate and not for CP's slate, there hasn't been any requirement for Bill to be able to put out the plan that you talk about. And the guidelines, for example, with ISS, and this is where I think there's an issue, they state if there's a majority of directors being elected in a proxy contest, then you have to put out a very detailed plan, a business plan, a strategy plan, an implementation plan, and a comparison of your board on board and what your senior management is going to look like. Because Bill's basically one guy under that, he didn't have to do any of that to get the proxy advisory firms to decide whether or not to back him. So I think he got a bit of a free pass, and I think it really exposes an issue with the perceived influence of these advisory firms that I think 50% is too high of a threshold to let a dissident to just be able to effectively take over a board.
I guess there's another way to look at it, though, from my point of view as an investor. The other way to look at it is to say the management of CP is so weak and the track record so poor that any activist can come in and say, this is a horrible management team, let's get rid of them, and it works. So I'd have to put a lot of the blame on the shoulders of the existing board, who have for a long time underperformed their rival, and glaringly so. I mean, that's basically why Ackman looks like he's going to win. He's got the support of most institutional shareholders saying, this team that ran this company sucks. And that's basically it.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think the main point I'm making out of that process is that if Bill had chosen one more delegate or nominee for his slate, he would have had to actually lay out what his plan was. And because he didn't do that, he didn't have to do that. Because of that one-person rule under the majority director election. But the fact that CP, is worrying most of this because of the lack of performance, there's no disagreement on that.
Why don't we see more of these type of proxy battles in Canada?
You see them, but you don't see them at this level. I think you made some initial comments at the opening about the profile of this is somewhat unheard of in Canada, and that is the case. I think because of the extent that boards, it's a smaller market, tighter market, the investment capital and the investment fund pool in Canada is fairly tight, trillions of dollars controlled by 20, 30 companies for investment. You find that you want to try and do it behind the scenes. You want to try and negotiate. The U.S., it's far more aggressive. We typically always say the difference between Canadian and the U.S. on a cultural basis with respect to business. So they're trying to do it behind the scenes, but that's starting to change. And as we have people like Ackman and people like Bill Ackman coming up here and doing the types of actions they're doing, it's exposing Canadian boards to the fact that it doesn't matter how large you are or how well known you are or how many stars you have on your board, you have to perform. And to your point, Kevin, that's what it comes down to, making money and performing, corporate governance aside.
Okay, well, thanks for being here.
Thanks.